Why Jesus Christ was invented, Part 2, Biblical Evidence. In Part 1 of this series, we examined who might have a motive to create a mythical Jesus. We looked at the entire history of the occupation of Imperial Rome in the Judea region, and how the Romans interacted with the local Jewish population. We took a peek at all 9 wars fought between Greco-Roman empires and the Jewish population. All but one of these involved the Roman Empire. We discovered there was a recurring theme in all these wars. Firstly, we noted that the locals did not want to have anything to do with foreign deities or customs, preferring autonomy over their beliefs and religious practices. And secondly, it was apparent that the Jewish people would not tolerate paying taxes or any other forms of levies or duties to an imperial government, whether this be in the form of money, produce, other manufactured goods, or military service. The Romans had tried to erect statues of their emperors and of their gods, such as Jupiter, in front of, or inside Jewish temples. This was anathema to the Jews. It inflamed their passions and fueled rebellious spirit. We also discussed why there was no apparent benefit to the Roman Empire of having Judea or Israel within its borders, if the locals didn't contribute anything of substantial benefit to the empire. Without any such contribution from the locals, maintaining that region within the Roman Empire was not profitable. Thus, the Romans had a choice. They could either decide to walk away from Judea, leave the Jews to do their own thing, or they could try some different approaches to make the Jews pay taxes and make them docile and compliant, without expending huge amounts of military resources. But how can we tell if they actually did this? Could historical events be the catalyst for creating a pacifistic Messiah? As we've discussed in an earlier video, the Romans won the Jewish revolt of 66 to 73 CE, but whilst suffering huge losses. During the revolt, the Romans' heaviest defeat came at the Battle of Beth Horon in 66 CE. Jewish rebels had seized Jerusalem, prompting Rome to respond with a large expeditionary force under Gallus. After failing to capture Jerusalem, Gallus began a retreat toward the coastal plain. As the Roman army entered the narrow Beth Horon Pass, Jewish forces ambushed them from elevated positions. The Romans were unable to form proper battle lines in the confined terrain. Around 6,000 Roman troops were killed, wiping out Legion 12, the Fulminata, and to make matters worse, the Legion's Aquila, that is the Eagle Standard, was captured. The defeat was both immensely shocking and embarrassing for the Roman military and Senate. Shocked by the loss, Rome committed to a full-scale military response, eventually crushing the revolt. We could easily understand, if we were to put ourselves in the shoes of the Roman Senate or generals, that we would not like to repeat this experience, where a whole legion is shamefully lost in battle. In the aftermath of the revolt, is it possible that the Roman elite pondered different approaches on how to control and take advantage of the Jewish population within their empire? And what can we learn from the Bible itself? Recorded history tells us that one of the notable events of the Jewish revolt was that when the Roman forces breached Jewish positions in Jerusalem, they also destroyed the temple. But this is the same account that Jesus prophesied to his disciples. In Matthew 24 verse 1-2, it says, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another, every one will be thrown down." The same prediction is repeated in Mark 13 verse 1-2 and Luke 21 verses 5-6. But according to the Bible, Jesus would have said this around 30 CE, whereas the event took place, we are told, around 70 CE. How could someone make such a precise prediction about an event within the lifetimes of the audience, about 40 years into the future? Barring the supernatural and the superhuman, we would conclude that the story was written after the event. If that is the case, could it be that the authors of the story wanted the Jews to believe that calamity, in the form of their comprehensive defeat in the Jewish revolt, had occurred because the Jews of 30 CE had rejected Jesus? It certainly feels that way. In the events leading up to the crucifixion, we hear in Matthew 26 verse 65 to 66. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He is worthy of death," they answered. We also hear from the Jews in Matthew 27 verse 25. Then answered all the people, and said, "His blood be on us, and on our children." What this tells us is that the Bible sought to convince readers that the Jews had rejected Jesus around 30 CE, and were openly admitting their guilt, so to speak. Now consider this: if this biblical story were to be presented to the defeated Jewish populace after 70 CE, it would give the impression that Jesus had predicted their defeat, as a result of their disobedience of their very own Jewish Messiah. At this point, a huge shout out to Joseph Atwill, author of Caesar's Messiah, is due. Joseph Atwill concluded pretty much the same thing in his groundbreaking magnum opus, Caesar's Messiah, which was first published around 2005. This is what he says. Point 1. Christianity did not originate among the lower classes in Judea. It was a creation of a Roman imperial family, the Flavians. Point 2. The Gospels were not written by the followers of a Jewish Messiah but by the intellectual circle surrounding the three Flavian emperors, Vespasian and his two sons, Titus and Domitian. Point 3. The Gospels were written following the 66 to 73 CE war between the Romans and the Jews, and many of the events of Jesus' ministry are satirical depictions of events from that war. Point 4. The purpose of Christianity was supersession. It was designed to replace the nationalistic and militaristic messianic movement in Judea with a religion that was pacifistic and would accept Roman rule. From Caesar's Messiah, the Roman conspiracy to invent Jesus. Flavian Signature Edition. Atwill's findings are profound. He had discovered the Roman rows by comparing passages from the New Testament and the Jewish Wars, one of Josephus's great works, by focusing on typology, which is a discipline to interpret events, persons, or statements in the biblical texts. Our conclusions are essentially the same, and whilst we use somewhat different methods to arrive at the conclusion, we believe the methods used to demonstrate the findings of Caesar's Messiah are quite valid. The alert viewer might also recall what Jesus had said about paying taxes. In Mark 12 verses 16 to 17 we learn the following. They brought the coin, and he asked them, "Whose image is this and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then Jesus said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's." We find the same narrative in Luke 20 verses 20 to 26 and Matthew 22 verses 15 to 22. Excuse the pun, but has the penny, or the shekel, dropped? These biblical passages are subtle hints to Jews to pay their taxes to the Roman Empire. This is how the Bible covertly manifests Roman intention onto the Jews. The New Testament is telling them that their refusal to heed Jesus' words will lead to a great calamity, defeat in war, and the destruction of their holy temple. Some people might be questioning why the Jews should even consider the New Testament and believe in its stories. Here again, the Romans had been very clever. The number 40 is very significant in Judaism, not least for the desert wandering, the time Moses spent on Mount Sinai, and the duration of the Great Flood. It was also very convenient for the Romans to set the Jesus story back 40 years from the time of the temple destruction. Why? Because it would have been difficult for people to fact-check biblical claims. The average life expectancy was far shorter in biblical times, so not many people who were around in 30 CE would still be alive after 70 CE. to challenge claims of events that had purportedly taken place 40 years earlier. The conclusions reached in this video will be anathema to many Christians. We anticipate that the repost to these conclusions will include numerous mentions of early Christian persecution. We'll address these claims in a later video in the series. For now, we want to leave you with yet another evidentiary snippet of Roman provenance, which also helps to further tie down the time frame of the Christ fabrication. Let us go back to that passage from Matthew 27 verse 25. Then answered all the people, and said, His blood be on us, and on our children. Why, oh why, did they mention the children? This is yet another subtle ploy of the Romans to implicate the adult Jewish men of 70 CE, in the alleged transgressions of their forefathers, for having rejected Jesus 40 years earlier. That's all for now. We hope you found this video interesting and thought-provoking.